Welcome. This is James Corbett of the Corbett Report with your EyeOpener Report for BoilingFrogsPost.com. Over the past decade, the peoples of Pakistan and Yemen have become all too familiar with the horrors of the Pentagon's latest toy, the unmanned aerial vehicle. Capable of raining death from above while its operator sits in air-conditioned comfort in an Air Force base thousands of miles away, drones represent the next stage in the evolution of 21st century warfare. And now, they're coming to Asia.
It's likely that US sea-based drones will be deployed in the Pacific and Indian Ocean regions. That's according to Commander of the US 7th Fleet, Scott Van Buskirk. The X-47B is capable of striking targets quickly. The unmanned armed planes can increase the range and persistence of intelligence, surveillance and reconnaissance operations. The carrier-based tailless aircraft are expected to play an integral role in future US operations in Asia. The first flight of the model was in early February.
Yeah, well, firstly, when the Obama administration announced that we would have the 2,500 troops being rotated in Darwin, almost immediately that came with a proposal for drones at the Cocos Islands, which is northwest of about 600 miles northwest of the Australian coast. I have been trying to keep tabs on this, but nothing new as yet. But you can bet your bottom dollar that it's not the last we hear of it in the Australian region, that's for sure.
The process of introducing drones to the Asia-Pacific has been unfolding for years now. But within the last few weeks, a flurry of stories have been reported demonstrating that the deployment of UAVs in the region has begun in earnest. Last month, the US Navy announced that they would begin moving next-generation drones into the Asia-Pacific region as early as October of next year in order to increase their ocean surveillance capabilities in the region. The new drones being prepared for the region include the MQ-4C Triton, an ocean-going version of the better-known Global Hawk drones currently being staged in Guam. Earlier this week, the Australian government announced it would be purchasing 7 maritime surveillance drones of its own. The plan is to acquire 7 RQ-4 Global Hawks from Northrop Grumman between now and 2019 at an estimated cost to Australian taxpayers of $3 billion, with an expected mission of patrolling the sea lanes in the increasingly crowded Indian Ocean. And in the latest worrying sign of the military tensions behind this drone escalation, the US's admission last month that it would begin using its drone fleet to monitor the disputed Senkaku Islands, currently the center of a tense territorial dispute between China and Japan, was answered this week by Beijing, who announced that they have set up a satellite surveillance grid to keep their own tabs on the area. Although the use of drones for military, intelligence, and civilian purposes is increasing everywhere in the world, underlying the recent military drone deployment in the Asia-Pacific is the increasing US-Chinese military tension that is driving so much of the region's politics. In this new game of Cold War-like tensions between the region's two dominant powers, there is a type of arms race that is taking place in the scramble to develop and deploy military drones over the hotly contested waters of the South China Sea and the East China Sea. One of the US's regional partners that finds itself increasingly in the crosshairs of this new round of UAV deployment is South Korea. Reports indicate that the demilitarized zone separating South and North Korea is now being patrolled with US drones, which are being staged at US military facilities in Guam. Last month, I had the chance to talk with Mike Bolosky and Hanul Na'avi, 2 independent journalists living in South Korea, about the use of drones in the DMZ, which they have been reporting on for their blog, The Last Defense. Bolosky used his own experience sighting a drone over the DMZ as the basis for his research into the complicated US-Korean drone relationship.
Yeah, I can't prove it, but as I mentioned in the previous segment, I saw 3 flashing lights over the DMZ, and so I did my research. I assumed they were drones right away, and what I found was in the Stars and Stripes newspaper, they reported 3 what they call Global Hawks. These are primarily surveillance drones. They were sent to Guam in late 2010 to the DMZ. Not to the DMZ, for the DMZ surveillance. So they launch from Guam, they go over to the DMZ and they do their surveillance, and then they go back, and they're also used for other areas in this part of Asia. So, and I also wanted to give a little backstory to that.
Please do, but before you do, I just wanted to clarify why the U.S. is using Guam. I mean, surely they have places they can stage from in Korea itself.
Yeah, I think that's where this little backstory kind of explains it. What happened was the U.S. is aggressively pushing the sale of these drones to the ROK government, and this is contrary to previous reports. Now, what I just mentioned, that the U.S. is pushing the sales, that was released from U.S. diplomatic cables, according to the Asia Times. And what was previously being reported by U.S. and Korean media alike was that Korea was pushing for the sale. They wanted to purchase, and it was the U.S. that was reluctant because they didn't want their state secrets to get out to North Korea or wherever. And I think, this is just my speculation, but I think what was going on is Korea kind of called bluff on the U.S. I think the U.S. wanted these drones to be used over North Korea regardless of if South Korea purchased them or not. And South Korea, realizing this, said, no, we're not going to buy them. The U.S. wanted 940 billion won. That's probably, I can't do the conversion off the top of my head. That's got to be over $900 billion for 4 drones. And it was too much money. So anyway, now South Korea's got the best of both worlds because the U.S. is using them in North Korea, and South Korea didn't have to pay for them. They obviously don't have to maintain and run them. So they won out in that deal.
Although the tit-for-tat deployment of drones is to be expected in a general milieu of increasing military tension in the region, many are particularly concerned because of the moral and ethical issues that are raised by the technology itself. As the primitive aerial bombardments of the First World War transitioned into the mechanized massacres of World War II, represented most horrifically by the firebombings of Dresden, Tokyo, and other cities, observers worried that the detachment of bomber pilots from the destruction and death that they were causing would have the effect of sanitizing war and allowing even more deadly atrocities against civilian populations to be committed by a pilot class that never has to face the consequences of their actions. Now that drone warfare is becoming more common, those concerns have been magnified immeasurably. Completely detached from their targets and even the instrument of warfare that they are piloting, drone pilots deploy missiles and gunfire on civilians on the other side of the world with the same amount of effort and engagement that it takes to play a video game. Even more frighteningly, the prospect of autonomous, armed UAVs raises the possibility that in future combat, humans will be eliminated from the equation altogether, with self-piloting drones being sent off to hit pre-programmed targets all by themselves. The ethical quandaries posed by a situation where an autonomous drone is found to have mistakenly killed civilians or committed a war crime is something that is being taken seriously by think tanks and organizations that are contemplating a future warfare where the only humans involved are the ones being killed on the ground. Gradually, these types of debates are finding their way into the media, which is beginning to finally note that the drone campaigns against Pakistan, Yemen, and other countries in fact constitutes a de facto undeclared state of war, one that is being tacitly upheld by both sides of the political paradigm.
Well, explain that, and this issue of moving toward drone wars, when you have a situation where the United States will not feel the pain of war, where a bombing of a village can be accomplished by someone on a computer keyboard with one keystroke.
Well, I think, even now, a lot of people act as if we're not at war. They sort of put Iraq and Afghanistan out of their minds. But with drone wars, basically, people can pretend it's not happening. I mean, not only is there no risk to the person who's controlling the drone, but there's a lot of support for this in Democratic and Republican circles. The notion is, if we're not putting troops at risk, all is okay, even if it violates the sovereignty of countries, even if civilians are killed, even if there's human rights problems. And I think most importantly, it lowers the bar for going to war. So I don't view it as progress in any sense.
With the Obama administration increasing the Bush administration's use of drones as a weapon of warfare, bipartisan support of the use of these UAVs has been assured, and the issue of whether or not Americans should be raining down death in Pakistan, Yemen, or other non-war zones has been effectively removed from the table in what promises to be yet another substance-free election cycle. But as the prospect of drone warfare begins to move into other parts of the world, and America's dominance with the technology begins to be challenged by competitors like China, who are increasingly working on their own technology, one wonders how and when the American public will react when and if Chinese drones are ever deployed against American allies in the Asia-Pacific region. This video is brought to you by the subscribers of BoilingFrogsPost.com. For more information on this and other topics, please go to BoilingFrogsPost.com. For more information and commentary from James Corbett, please go to CorbettReport.com.